Assalamualaikum, I am Widhi Mutakin from Expos Academy. In this short course, I will try to explain the basics of Microsoft Excel as clearly and concisely as possible. This video is suitable for those of you who are completely beginners or have never used Excel before. First, let me explain the structure of this course. In the first lesson, we will cover what Excel is and its various variants. In the next lesson, I will explain the UI of Excel. Then, you will learn various navigation techniques in Excel. Next, you will learn how to input data. Then learn the difference between Workbook and Worksheet. After that, we will discuss how to edit the data that we have input in Excel. Then, in the next lesson, you will learn the AutoFill feature, and then learn how to create a custom list to be used with the AutoFill. Next, you will learn the basics of formulas in Excel. Then, we will discuss how to use functions. In the next lesson, we will try to create a simple formula using the sum function. And finally, you will learn to use the AutoSum feature. Indeed, I provide a timestamp in this video to make it easier for you to move from one lesson to another. However, I don't recommend you to watch the video by jumping around randomly, at least if you are learning Excel for the first time. This is because I have organized the curriculum sequentially. If you watch it randomly, you will most likely get confused at some point. So, what is Excel? In short, Excel is one of the software from the Office family developed by Microsoft. The main use of Excel is to process data arranged in the form of a grid or a table consisting of columns and rows. Besides Excel, there are actually many other software in the Office bundle. Two of the most popular ones besides Excel are PowerPoint and Word. You should note that Excel comes in many different types of versions. There are versions for Windows. There are versions for macOS. There are versions that run on a web browser. And there are even versions that run on mobile devices. From the licensing perspective, Microsoft provides two types of licenses. The software bundle called Office is sold with a one-time fee or a perpetual license, and the software bundle called Microsoft 365 is sold as a subscription. Besides these variations, we also need to acknowledge the time when the software was released. In general, newer versions have more features than the older released versions. To avoid confusion, I should explain that I recorded this video using a desktop version of Excel on a Windows 10 operating system. The licensing type is a subscription or Microsoft 365 version available in early 2024. If your Excel looks a bit different from the one I use, it is most likely due to the difference in type or version of software as I just explained. But you don't need to worry, as our discussion is still at the basic level. Inshallah, most of the things that I will be teaching should be applicable to any version of Excel. Let's start by getting familiar with Excel's UI or user interface. The first time you open Excel, you will see something like this. To create a new blank document, you can select Blank Workbook. This is the main interface of Excel, or rather, the version of Microsoft 365 in 2024. At the very top, you can find several buttons. Among them are the Save, Undo, and Redo buttons, and so on. This area is called the Quick Access toolbar. Below that, you will find the menu. In general, all apps from the Microsoft Office family have a menu system called the ribbon. What makes this ribbon menu system different is that it is not vertical but extends horizontally. The menu also does not consist of only text. You can find many buttons with various icons, as well as pull-down lists, radio buttons, and so on. In general, you can find several menus here: Home, Insert, Draw, Page Layout, and so on. Regarding the Draw menu, I believe that most of you will not have this menu in your Excel UI. Again, this is due to the different versions of Excel that we use. But it doesn't matter because we won't be discussing the draw feature in the short course video. Alright? You should know that the ribbon menu is dynamic. By dynamic, I mean that it can change automatically depending on the context or the work we are doing. For example, let's say I create a rectangular shape object. If we have a shape object selected, the ribbon menu changes so that it now displays the shape format menu that was not there before. When I click on another area, the shape format menu disappears again. Let me press this undo button to restore the document to its original state. You can also press Ctrl Z to perform undo. For now, I will briefly explain four menus. The first is the home menu. Generally, this is the menu that Excel users see and access most often. In this menu, you can set the format for the text, such as selecting the font, making the text bold, setting the text alignment, setting the styles, etc. There are also parameters and commands related to data structure, such as inserting and deleting cell, row, column, and so on. The next menu is Insert. This is the menu that we need to access if we want to insert certain objects into our document, such as inserting images, inserting various shapes as we did earlier, inserting charts, URL links, headers and footers, math symbols, etc. Next is the Page Layout menu. In this menu, we can access various parameters related to page organization. For example, we can set the document theme, set the margin, orientation, paper size, set the layout and depth of objects, etc. The point is, if you intend to print your document on paper, this is the menu that you need to open to prepare it. Of all the menus, one that stands out on its own is the File menu, because instead of opening a horizontal ribbon menu, the File menu will display a full screen interface. Microsoft calls this screen the Backstage view. In this screen, we can create new files, open existing files, save files, print files, and so on. To return to the standard Excel interface, you can press this back arrow, or you can also press the Escape key on your keyboard. Excel actually allows you to customize the ribbon menu and a quick access toolbar to fit your own needs or workflow. But due to time constraints, we won't be discussing this feature in this video. Then, for the other UI elements, we will discuss them gradually in the next lessons. Alright? Next, we will discuss navigation techniques in Excel. There are a lot of navigation techniques in Excel. To save time, in this video, we will only discuss the most common techniques that people use. The first technique is scrolling the document. For this, you can use the vertical scroll bar and horizontal scroll bar present in the interface. But this method is a bit slow, because we have to move the mouse first to the edge of the screen. A faster method for vertical scrolling is to rotate the scroll wheel on the mouse. And to do horizontal scrolling, you need to hold down the Shift and Control keys at the same time and then rotate the scroll wheel. The next navigation technique is zoom. You can press the plus and minus buttons below to zoom in and zoom out. You can also drag the slider around if you want. The line in the center of the slider indicates the default zoom level, or 100%. Another method to adjust the zoom is to press the percentage number in the bottom right corner. When you press it, a window called Zoom will open. From here, we can access some commonly used zoom levels. We can even type in a custom zoom level in this field if we want to. Alright? A faster way to perform zoom is to use the mouse and keyboard. For this, you need to hold down the Control key and then turn the scroll wheel on the mouse up or down. So those are some of the navigation techniques that you can use in Excel. Next, we will discuss the basic techniques of inputting data in Excel. You can see that a document in Excel is divided into columns labeled with letters and rows labeled with numbers. Each of the boxes formed by these columns and rows is called a cell. since each cell is basically the intersection of a column and a row. Each cell has a unique address consisting of its column letter and its row number. For example, if I click on this cell, the letter D at the top and the number 5 on the left side become darker. Also, the name box at the top left now displays the text D5. This indicates that the address of the current cell is D5. If we click on another cell, the dark color of the column and row will change. The same applies to the cell address in the name box. Alright, now let's see how we can input data into a cell. If we click on cell B2, then press the letter A on the keyboard, this letter A now acts as the candidate data for cell B2. I call it a candidate because the data hasn't actually been entered yet. If I press the escape key, the letter A that I typed earlier disappears. If I type A again in the same cell, for the data we type to be confirmed or entered as data in the cell, you must press the Enter key or the Tab key. The difference between these two buttons is that if we press the Enter button, after the data is confirmed, the active cell will move to the cell below it. Just for example, now I input the letter B, press Enter, C, press Enter, D, Enter, and so on. Meanwhile, if we press the Tab key, the next active cell will move to the next cell on the right. For example, I select this cell, press A, Tab B, Tab C, Tab D, and so on. The conclusion is, if the data we want to input extends downward or vertically, pressing Enter will be faster. But if the data we want to input extends sideways or horizontally, pressing Tab will be faster. Besides the Enter and Tab keys, you can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard or just click anywhere on Worksheet to confirm the data we want to input. For example, let's type A in this cell. Click here, type B, click here, type C, click again, and so on. Example with the arrow keys. We can type A in this cell, press right arrow key, B, down arrow, C, left arrow, D, and so on. Now, regarding the arrow keys method, there are certain conditions where this technique cannot be used. We will discuss this issue later in this video. When working with Excel, you will often encounter the terms workbook and worksheet. Simply put, a workbook is an Excel file or document with the XLSX extension. That is why the button to create a new file or document in Excel is called a blank workbook. Then, a worksheet, sometimes just referred to as a sheet, is a single working area consisting of these columns and rows. You can see the name of the active worksheet at the bottom. I currently only have one worksheet called Sheet 1. You can have multiple worksheets in a single workbook. To create a new sheet, we can press the plus button below. For now, let's create 4 worksheets. We can move from one sheet to another by pressing the tab box that displays the sheet name. This is Sheet 1. This is Sheet 2. This is Sheet 3. This is Sheet 4, and so on. You can also press the shortcut Ctrl Page Up to select the previous sheet on the left, and press Ctrl Page Down to select the next sheet on the right side. So again, another name for Excel files or documents is workbook, while the working area inside it is called worksheets or just sheets for short. Understanding this concept is important because it later relates to how we reference data in Excel. We can reference data within the same worksheet, between different worksheets, and even between different workbooks. If we no longer need a worksheet and want to delete it, simply right-click on worksheet name, then select Delete. Usually, we do not want generic names like Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and so on for our worksheets, as that will be confusing. We can change the name to better reflect the data inside it by double-clicking directly on the name. Then just type the new name. For example, I call this sheet Sales. Double-click this one, Then we change the name to products and so on. We can arrange the order of the sheets by click dragging on their names or tabs. Excel will display a small black arrow as a preview for the new location. Just release the mouse to confirm. Now, let's first input text data into cell B3. For this, you can click directly on the cell with the mouse, or you can also move the active cell with the arrow keys until the active cell is cell B3. Then type earning. Notice how this box above changes as we enter the data. This box or field is called the formula bar. You shouldn't be confused by the large size of my formula bar. I deliberately set the size to be large via the Excel options window so that the data or formula that I type can be seen more clearly in a video. Remember, this data is not yet considered entered into the cell. We need to press enter to confirm the data and move the active cell to the cell below it. Now type cost, then press enter again, then type profit and press enter to confirm. Alright, in this condition, let's say we change our mind. We want to revise this earning text to income. To replace the whole data, it will be faster if we just retype everything. To do that, we first select the cell, then just type in the new data, income. Then you can press enter to confirm. Now, let's say we change our mind again. It seems better if we add the letter S at the end of each of these words, because later, the data that will be entered is the total data from several sources of income and expenses. To add the letter S at the end of each of these words, we don't want to retype them all one by one. It will be easier if we just edit the existing text. There are two ways to edit cell data in Excel. First, we can select the cell we want to edit. Then we use the formula bar above to edit the data. Click here, then type S. When you are done, you can confirm and exit the formula bar by pressing enter or tab. In this case, you cannot use the arrow keys to confirm the data. Why? Because the arrow keys are used to move the text cursor when editing the data inside the formula bar. So we press enter. Besides using the formula bar, we can also edit the data by double-clicking on the cell. With this method, we will be editing the data directly within the cell box. Just as before, we cannot use the arrow keys to confirm the data. You need to press the enter key or the tab key for this. Let's also edit this profit text by adding the letter S behind it. Alright. Next, we will discuss a feature in Excel called AutoFill. To save time, I have filled some dummy data in the cells along the 6 columns and first 2 rows of the record. Now, let's assume that we need to input the names of the months in row 2. Well, this is where we will utilize the AutoFill feature. First, we must input at least one month's name with the correct spelling. In this case, I have to use English because the language setting in my Windows operating system is English. We will discuss the AutoFill technique for other languages later. For now, type in this cell January. Enter to confirm. To use the AutoFill feature, make sure the active cell is at the reference data position. In this case, is the cell that says January. Then, if you notice, there is a small box or dot in the bottom right corner of the cell selection box. Click drag this small point to the right all the way to column H. Then release it. You can see how Excel helps us fill in the names of the following months automatically. The AutoFill feature can also work vertically, and it can also work on months other than January. For example, we can drag the AutoFill point from this month of June downwards. Then we drag the AutoFill point of this October month to the right, and so on. Notice that when a value reaches December, the month order automatically loops back to January. Let me undo this first by pressing Ctrl Z until we only have the names of the months above. By utilizing the AutoFill feature, we can also create numbering quickly. For this, we must provide at least 2 cells containing numeric data. we can input the number 1 in each cell, for example, enter, then number 2, and enter again. With these two cells, each cell can calculate the difference between the two values and use it to determine the next numbers. So, if we select these two cells by click drag, then we click drag the corner point or the AutoFill point downward until as far as we need, then let go. Each cell has just made a numbering automatically based on the two values we provided. This AutoFill technique also works on numbers whose increment is not 1. For example, we can input the number 2 here, enter, then type the number 4 below it, enter again. Select these two cells, then click drag the AutoFill point down. Now we have numbering 2, but with only even numbers. Just for example again, let's try inputting the number 5, then the number 10 just below it. If we try to apply AutoFill, now we have a sequence of numbers that are multiples of 5. Up to this point, I believe you already understand how to create numbering or number sequences using the AutoFill feature. Before we move on to the next lesson, I want to briefly explain how to delete data in each cell. It is quite easy. You just need to click to select the cell, then press the delete button on your keyboard. If there are many cells that you need to delete, you can click drag first until all the cells are selected, then press the delete button. There are still many features of AutoFill that we haven't discussed in this video. Excel even provides other features besides AutoFill for the automatic data input process. These techniques work like magic in helping you fill a lot of data very quickly in Excel. If you are interested, I cover all of this in my complete Excel course. You can check the link in the description. Previously, we have learned how to create a sequence of month names using AutoFill in English. Not all of us use English in our daily lives. So, the next question will be, what if we want to create a sequence of month names or day names, for example, in other languages? Can we do this with the AutoFill feature? The answer is yes, we can. The AutoFill feature can actually create any list of text regardless of the language we use. The important thing is that you have to provide the list of data first, so Excel knows what to do when it encounters one of the data in the AutoFill process. To create our own AutoFill or so-called custom list, we must go to the File menu. Then click on the Options button. The Excel Options window will open. Select the Advanced category, and then scroll down to the bottom. You will find a button that says Edit Custom Lists. Click on that button, and here is the window where we control the list that appears when performing AutoFill. We can see that there is already a short version of day names, a long version of it, a short version of the month names, and a long version of it. Everything is in English. Now, to create a new list, we can choose New List here. Then, in this area, you can type the data one by one. To give you an example, because the names of months and days are a bit long, I want to input the names of seasons, but in my native language, Bahasa Indonesia. Feel free to use your own language if you want to. I type in panas, then press enter, gugur, enter, then dingin, enter, and then the last one, semi. If you are done, you can press the add button here. We can see that our custom list has been registered. You can create the month names and day names in your own language, or perhaps other lists in English using the same method. After you are done, you can click this OK button to confirm, then click OK again to close the Excel Options window. Now, it is time to test whether our custom list is working or not. Type in this cell, gugur, then enter. Select the cell again, and drag the AutoFill point down. Alhamdulillah, the list of season names we created earlier is working correctly. So, that is basically how we can create a custom list for the AutoFill feature in Excel. Before we continue, just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe first so that you don't miss out on our upcoming tutorials and short courses. Now, we will discuss the basics of writing formula in Excel. So, what is a formula? Simply put, a formula is an expression or a set of text that we input into a cell which causes the cell to display a dynamic value. To make it clearer, let's see the following example. We have two rows filled with data, namely the incomes and costs rows. Meanwhile, the cells in the profits row doesn't have any data yet. But, sorry, let me fix this letter P so it is uppercase. Okay, to calculate the profit, we have to take the value from the income cell and subtract it with the value in the cost cell. So again, profit equals income minus cost. Indeed, if we have only a few data like this, we can just enter the calculation result manually in a profit cells. But imagine if you have hundreds of cells that you have to input. You do not want to calculate and enter them one by one, as that will be too time consuming. Even more so, if there are changes or revisions to the income or cost data, you have to calculate and re-enter all the profits data from the start. Well, this is the benefit of formula in Excel. With formulas, instead of entering the data manually, we only need to write the rule once. Excel then will take care of most of the work for us. To create a formula in Excel, we must start with an equal symbol. We can type it directly within the cell, or we can click on the cell first, then type it in a formula bar. I will be using the formula bar a lot in this course as the size is large, so you guys can see the formula much better. Then, we want to take the value from cell C3 and subtract it with cell C4. You can type the cell references manually, C3 minus C4 like this. Or you can just click on the cell you want to reference. Excel will type the cell address automatically. Then type the minus symbol and click again on cell C4. After you are done, just like inputting data, you have to press enter to confirm the formula. And here is the result. At a glance, it looks like normal number data. But if you click on the cell and check the formula bar, the content of this cell is actually a formula, not a direct number value. What we see in the cell is the result of the formula. Now, to create formulas for the next columns, we don't need to rewrite the formulas one by one. We can just duplicate it with the copy-paste method, or by utilizing the AutoFill feature. Excel automatically adjusts the cell reference in the duplicated formulas to match the column where the formula is. So, the formula in this cell is automatically converted by Excel into column D, that is D3 minus D4. The formula in this cell automatically changes to column E, this one changes to F, and so on. The next advantage of formulas is when we need to revise the data. Let's say it turns out that the value of incomes in this month should be 250. Notice how the value in a profits row automatically changes to 150. Likewise, if we change the value of the cost, just for example, we revise this value to 100, the profits value below is automatically updated by Excel to 70. From these examples, you can see the importance of formulas in Excel. Besides being able to contain cell references and basic math operations such as addition, multiplication, and so on, formulas can also contain functions. By definition, a function in Excel is a small program that we can use inside a formula that can perform certain tasks. So, please differentiate between the terms formula and function. We must write a function inside the formula, but formulas themselves can be written without any function at all. For example, the formula we wrote in this profits row. At the time I recorded this video, Excel has more than 500 functions, and this number usually continues to grow from year to year. All functions in Excel are written in capital letters, followed by the opening parentheses and closing parentheses symbols. If we type a function name in lowercase letters, Excel will usually automatically correct it to uppercase. We can think of a function as a factory machine. It receives raw materials and processes them into products. We can call these raw materials input, and the product it produces as output. In Excel, the inputs for functions are called arguments. If you are wondering, why is there an open and close parenthesis symbols after the function name? Well, it is because that is where we place the arguments or inputs for the function. There are functions that only have one argument. Some functions have multiple arguments. And there are even functions that have no arguments at all. For functions that have multiple arguments, each of the arguments must be separated by a comma symbol. There are still many things we can discuss about functions in Excel, but I think this information is enough for us to start using them. For practice, let's try to create a formula that contains the most basic function, which is the sum function. Basically, we use the sum function to get the total of all the values in its arguments. Let's say we want to total out all the incomes of the 6 months. Based on what we have learned before, you may be thinking of creating a formula by typing the equal symbol, then clicking on C3, then plus, then clicking on cell D3, plus, E3, and so on. We can do this, but of course, it is not efficient. Imagine if the data range is long, for example, up to 2 to 3 years or more. For this case, we should use the sum function. First, we type equal because we want to create a formula. Then type sum. Excel will try to help us by displaying a suggestion list of function names with the word sum inside them. You can just ignore it by typing the open parenthesis symbol directly. But if the function name you want to use is quite long, you should make use of this suggestion list. To do that, you can press the down or up arrow keys on the keyboard until the function you want to use is selected. Then press the tab key. Excel will type the name of the function for us along with the parenthesis symbol. Or, the alternative method, we can just double-click directly using the mouse on the function name. With this, Excel will also type the function name for us as well as the open parenthesis symbol. Alright, next, we have to enter the arguments needed by the sum function. We can do this by clicking on this cell, then a comma, clicking on this cell, another comma, clicking on this cell, and so on. But if the cells we want to sum are already stacked one another vertically or horizontally like the current data, we can simply select all of them by click dragging. Excel automatically types all the cell addresses for us. After you are done, you can type the closing parenthesis symbol. Or, if you forget and press enter, Excel will add the closing parenthesis for us. And this is the result. If we click on the cell again and check the formula bar, you can see that Excel has added the closing parenthesis symbol behind the function automatically. But you need to keep in mind that if the function you write is complex or nested, you must type the closing parenthesis symbol manually yourself. This is because in complex formulas, Excel will not write the parentheses for us automatically. So, if you skip typing the closing parenthesis symbol, the formula will produce an error. Okay? Before ending this short course, I want to mention a feature that is still related to the sum function. Because sum is the most commonly used function, Excel provides a special command and even a special shortcut to create it automatically. You can access this command in the home ribbon menu, which is the one called AutoSum. Or you can also use the shortcut Alt equal. Just for example, let's say we want to sum all the cost values. We can click on the cell right next to the data we want to calculate. Then press this AutoSum button. You can see that Excel automatically created a formula for us with the sum function inside it. All we have to do is to press enter to confirm. Another example, we want to sum all the profit values. As before, we need to select the cell next to the data. Now, we will try the shortcut for the AutoSum command, which is Alt equal. And we have the formula and a sum function inside it. But what is wrong with this formula is that Excel uses the data above as the sum argument and not the data on its left side. Because currently, the cell reference code is selected, we can just click drag to set new target cells directly. If you are done, you can press enter to confirm. And here is the result. You have learned a lot from this short course video. But believe it or not, we have only covered no more than 5% of Excel's features and potential. If you are interested in learning more about Excel, you should take my online course, which covers Excel from the very basics to mastering all the advanced features, including numerous important functions in Excel. You can find the link in the description below. I hope this short video course can be useful for you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Wassalamualaikum.